So I want to talk about caregiver recovery versus grief, right? So when my mother passed, there were a lot of things that were a little bit different than when my father passed. My father passed about 6 months before. I was not his caregiver. I loved him. I miss him dearly. There was grief. I started some grief counseling then, right? When my mother passed, there were some things that were different that didn't happen. And I remember posting, and I know a lot of folks in the industry, I know a lot of caregivers, and I asked the question on social media, like, how do you deal with the caregiver recovery? And a lot of the answers were grief related, right? And for me, there's a difference, right? The caregiver recovery, like, first of all, when you're a caregiver, like for me, for 10 years, I was in fight or flight mode, right? I was either going into an emergency, coming out of an emergency, preparing for an emergency, or in the middle of an emergency. When she passed, I knew about processing grief because I had had 6 months of working with a grief counselor on how to process grief. I didn't know how to deal with the caregiver recovery. And the caregiver recovery part of it is, how do I get out of fight or flight mode?